Lucas Carter's hands were shaking as he stared at two screens that would define the rest of his life. On his laptop, red emergency alerts screamed that his company's entire infrastructure was collapsing. On his phone, a message from Emily's school nurse. "Your daughter has a fever of 104. Come immediately." Outside, the worst snowstorm in a decade was burying the city. He had 6 minutes to choose. 6 minutes before the system locked him out forever. 6 minutes before his daughter's fever became something worse. The choice should have been obvious, but 12 years of climbing the corporate ladder had trained him to hesitate. If you want to see how Lucas's impossible choice reshapes everything he thought he knew about success, survival, and what really matters, stay with me until the end. And when you finish, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The notification came at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 days before Christmas. Lucas Carter was hunched over his standing desk in the corner of the open plan office, squinting at code that had stopped making sense 2 hours ago. His coffee had gone cold. His neck ached. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with the kind of frequency that burrowed into your skull and nested there. The alert was from Emily's school. He almost ignored it. He was in the middle of debugging an authentication module that controlled access for 3 million users, and every minute he delayed meant another 1,000 people potentially locked out of their accounts. The company's holiday sale started tomorrow. Ava Sinclair, the CEO, had made it abundantly clear that failure was not an option. But something made him look. "Mr. Carter, this is Nurse Phillips from Riverside Elementary. Emily has developed a high fever, 104 degrees, and is asking for you. The roads are getting bad with the storm. Please come as soon as you can." Lucas's stomach dropped. He grabbed his phone and called the school. It rang 4 times before the nurse picked up. "Mr. Carter, I'm coming right now. How is she?" "She's stable, but the fever came on fast. She's complaining of a headache and she's very lethargic. I gave her some water, but I think she needs to see a doctor." Lucas was already shoving his laptop into his bag. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The roads are getting slick. Be careful." He hung up and turned toward the exit. That's when his workstation monitor flashed red. "Critical system failure. All authentication services down. Immediate response required." Lucas froze. No, not now. He pulled his laptop back out, fingers already flying across the keyboard. The authentication server had crashed. Not just crashed, it was hemorrhaging error logs like a severed artery. The backup systems were failing to kick in. The entire payment infrastructure was about to go offline. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the senior DevOps engineer. "Dude, where are you? Everything's on fire. Ava's losing her mind." Lucas stared at the screen, then at his phone with the nurse's message still glowing. Emily or the company? His daughter or his career? The choice should have been simple, but his hands were still on the keyboard. He'd been the lead engineer on this project for 11 months. He'd designed the failover protocols. He knew the architecture better than anyone. If he walked away now, it could take them hours to find the problem. Hours that could cost the company millions. Hours that could cost him everything he'd built here. But Emily had a fever of 104. His phone rang. Ava Sinclair. He declined the call. He closed his laptop. He ran. The parking lot was already covered in 3 inches of snow. Lucas's Toyota Camry, 12 years old, heated seats broken, one headlight dimmer than the other, was buried under a white blanket. He didn't bother brushing it off. He started the engine, cranked the defroster to maximum, and used his forearm to clear a small porthole in the windshield. His phone rang again. Ava. He declined again. The roads were worse than he'd expected. The storm had hit fast, and the plows hadn't caught up. Traffic moved at 15 miles per hour. Cars skidded at intersections. Lucas gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Emily's school was only 3 miles away. It took him 22 minutes. When he finally pulled into the parking lot, his phone had 12 missed calls, 6 from Ava, 3 from Marcus, 2 from the VP of engineering, 1 from someone in HR. He ignored all of them. Inside the school, the hallways smelled like disinfectant and wet boots. Nurse Phillips met him at the door to her office. Emily was lying on the vinyl cot, curled under a thin blanket, her face flushed and damp with sweat. "Daddy?" Lucas's chest tightened. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her. Hey, Bug, I'm here. I don't feel good. I know, sweetheart. We're going to get you home and get you feeling better, okay? Now, he pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. She was burning up. Nurse Phillips handed him a printout. Her temperature was 104.2 when I took it 10 minutes ago. I'd recommend taking her to urgent care, or the ER. With this storm, I don't know how long it'll take to get anywhere. Lucas nodded. He scooped Emily into his arms. She was heavier than he remembered, growing too fast, and carried her toward the exit. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He kept walking. The nearest urgent care clinic was closed. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Closed due to weather. Seek emergency services if needed." Lucas sat in the idling car, Emily half asleep in the passenger seat, and calculated distances. The hospital was across town. In this weather, it could take an hour, maybe more. His phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. Lucas answered, "I can't talk right now." Lucas, man, where the hell are you? The entire auth system is down. We've got 3 million users locked out. Ava is about to detonate. I'm dealing with a family emergency. Family emergency? Lucas, the company is literally hemorrhaging money every second this is down. We need you. I can't. My daughter is sick. There was a pause. Marcus lowered his voice. Look, I get it. I do. But you're the only one who knows this system inside and out. If you could just remote in for 20 minutes. I said I can't. Lucas hung up. Emily stirred. Daddy, my head hurts. I know, Bug. We're going to the hospital, okay? You're going to be fine. He put the car in gear and pulled back onto the road. The snow was coming down heavier now. Visibility was maybe 30 feet. Lucas leaned forward, trying to see the lane markings. His phone buzzed relentlessly in the cup holder. He glanced at it once. 17 missed calls. He turned the phone face down. They were halfway to the hospital when the Camry's front tire hit a patch of ice and the car lurched sideways. Lucas's heart jackhammered as he steered into the skid, easing off the gas. The car fishtailed, then straightened. Emily whimpered. It's okay, Uka, Lucas said, though his voice was shaking. We're okay. He forced himself to slow down. 20 miles per hour, 15. The hospital was still 4 miles away. His phone rang again. This time he answered without looking. I already told you I'm not... Lucas Carter. The voice was sharp, cold, and unmistakably Ava Sinclair's. Where are you? Lucas exhaled slowly. I'm on my way to the hospital. My daughter is sick. Your daughter? Ava's tone didn't soften. Lucas, do you have any idea what's happening right now? Our entire authentication infrastructure is offline. We're losing approximately $42,000 per minute. The holiday sale launches in 16 hours. If this isn't fixed by tomorrow morning, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar loss and a PR nightmare that will take months to recover from. I understand that. Do you? Because you're not here. Lucas tightened his grip on the wheel. My 6-year-old daughter has a fever of 104, and I'm trying to get her to a hospital in the middle of a snowstorm. I'm sorry about the timing, but I can't help you right now. There was a long silence. Then Ava said, I'm going to be very clear with you, Lucas. If you don't fix this tonight, you're done. Not just at this company. I will make sure every recruiter, every hiring manager, every CTO in this industry knows that you abandoned your team during a critical failure. You will not work in tech again. Lucas felt something inside him snap. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet, final sound of a thread pulled too tight for too long. Then I'm done, Lucas said. Ava went silent. I quit, Lucas continued. His voice was steady now. Effective immediately. I'm not coming back. Not tonight. Not ever. You can't be serious. I've spent 12 years killing myself for companies that would replace me in a week if I dropped dead at my desk. I've missed birthdays, recitals, bedtimes. I've raised my daughter on takeout and apologies. And for what? So I can be threatened on the worst day of my life? Lucas, I'm done, Ava. Find someone else. He hung up. For a moment, he just sat there, hands trembling on the wheel, the gravity of what he'd just done settling over him like the snow on the windshield. Then Emily coughed, and he remembered why it didn't matter. He pressed the gas and kept driving. The hospital emergency room was chaos. The storm had caused a 6-car pileup on the highway, and the waiting room was packed with people holding bloodied towels to their heads, cradling broken arms, or simply staring into space with the shell-shocked expressions of people who'd just survived something terrible. Lucas carried Emily to the front desk. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, barely looked up. Name and date of birth? Rule, Emily Carter, March 14th, 2020. What's the issue? High fever, 104 degrees, headache, lethargy. The woman typed slowly. Take a seat. Someone will call you. How long is the wait? Could be a few hours. We're understaffed because of the storm. Lucas glanced at the waiting room. Every seat was full. She's 6 years old and she's burning up. I understand, sir. We're doing the best we can. Lucas wanted to argue, but he didn't have the energy. He found a spot against the wall and sat down with Emily in his lap. She rested her head against his chest. I'm cold, she whispered. I know, bug. He pulled off his jacket and draped it over her. His phone was still buzzing. He pulled it out and saw 31 missed calls, 46 unread texts, and 12 voicemails. He powered it off. 2 hours passed. Emily's fever wasn't dropping. Lucas had asked the receptionist 3 times for an update. Each time the answer was the same, we'll call you as soon as we can. Lucas was considering demanding to see a doctor when the automatic doors slid open and a woman in a long black coat walked in. Ava Sinclair. Lucas's stomach turned. She spotted him immediately and crossed the waiting room in 6 strides. She looked exactly like she did in every board meeting. Perfectly tailored, ruthlessly composed, and utterly out of place in a hospital ER filled with bleeding strangers. What are you doing here? Lucas said. Ava stopped in front of him. Her eyes flicked to Emily, then back to him. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I quit. I know, I was there. Ava's voice was clipped. But before you burn your entire career to the ground, you need to hear this. I don't care. The system failure wasn't an accident. That stopped him. Ava pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward him. It showed a terminal window filled with lines of code. We traced the failure back to a manual override. Someone with senior-level access intentionally triggered a cascading shutdown of the authentication servers. Lucas stared at the screen. That's not possible. The only people with that kind of access are you, me, and 4 senior engineers, Ava finished. And I know it wasn't you because you were too busy playing hero. Lucas's mind raced. You think someone sabotaged the system? I don't think. I know. Ava's expression was unreadable. And I think they framed you for it. Emily stirred in Lucas's arms. Daddy, I'm thirsty. Lucas looked down at his daughter, then back at Ava. I don't care. Whatever this is, it's not my problem anymore. It is if your name is attached to the failure. Right now, the narrative inside the company is that you walked out in the middle of a crisis. If this turns into a legal issue, and it will, you'll be the first person they investigate. Lucas felt the walls closing in. Ava softened just slightly. I didn't come here to threaten you, Lucas. I came here to tell you that someone is trying to destroy both of us. And if we don't figure out who, we're both finished. Lucas looked at Emily, then at Ava, then at the waiting room full of people who had their own problems. He was so tired. Fine, he said quietly, but not here. Not now. My daughter comes first. Ava nodded. Agreed. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About earlier, I was out of line. Lucas didn't respond. Ava left. Look, Emily was finally called back at 11:30 p.m. The doctor, a young resident with kind eyes and 2 days' worth of stubble, examined her quickly. Ears, throat, chest. He ordered blood work and a flu test. Probably just a virus, he said. But with a fever that high, I want to rule out anything serious. Lucas nodded numbly. They moved Emily to a small observation room. She fell asleep almost immediately, her small body curled under a stiff hospital blanket. Lucas sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe. His phone was still off. He didn't turn it back on. At 1:15 a.m., the doctor returned. "Good news," he said. "It's influenza, but her blood work looks okay. No signs of secondary infection. We'll give her some IV fluids and antipyretics to bring the fever down, and you can take her home in a few hours." Lucas felt the tension drain out of his body. "She's going to be okay?" Drain. "She's going to be fine. Kids bounce back fast." Lucas closed his eyes. "Thank you." The doctor left. Lucas sat in the quiet room listening to the beep of the IV monitor and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond the door. He thought about Ava's words. Someone is trying to destroy both of us. He thought about the system failure, the manual override, the timing. He thought about the 12 years he'd spent building his reputation and how quickly it could all disappear. And then he thought about Emily, asleep in the hospital bed, her fever finally starting to break. He knew what he had to do. What? At 3:47 a.m., Lucas's phone buzzed. He'd turned it back on to check the time, and immediately messages started pouring in. But one stood out. It was from Ava. "I found something. We need to talk. Now." Lucas glanced at Emily. She was still asleep, her breathing steady. He texted back, "I'm at the hospital. Can't leave." The response came 30 seconds later. "I'm coming to you." Lucas frowned. "It's 4 a.m. I don't care. This can't wait." 20 minutes later, Ava walked into the observation room carrying 2 cups of vending machine coffee. She looked different. No coat, no polished composure, just exhaustion. She handed him one of the cups. "How is she?" "Influenza. She's going to be fine." Ava nodded. She pulled up a second chair and sat down. "What did you find?" Lucas asked. Ava pulled out her laptop and opened it. "I went through the server logs myself. The manual override that triggered the failure came from an IP address inside our building. Office 47B. Lucas frowned. "That's Richard Brennan's office." Lucas felt his stomach drop. Richard Brennan was the VP of engineering. He'd been with the company for 8 years. He'd been Lucas's mentor. "That doesn't make sense," Lucas said. "Why would Richard sabotage his own company?" "That's what I thought. Until I found this." Ava turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was an email thread. The sender was Richard Brennan. The recipient was an address Lucas didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Timeline for acquisition talks." Lucas skimmed the emails. His blood went cold. Richard was negotiating with a competitor. He was selling proprietary information, architecture diagrams, user data models, security protocols, in exchange for an executive position at the rival company. But the deal hinged on one condition. Ava's leadership had to fail publicly. "He's been planning this for months," Ava said quietly. "The system failure was supposed to look like your incompetence, my inability to manage a crisis. The board would lose confidence. I'd be voted out. The company would be vulnerable." Lucas stared at the screen. "And he gets a golden parachute while we burn." "Exactly." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "So what do we do?" Ava closed the laptop. "We prove it, publicly, undeniably, and we make sure he never works in this industry again. Lucas looked at Emily, then at Ava. "Okay," he said, "but we do this my way. No more threats, no more sacrificing people for the bottom line." Ava met his eyes. "Agreed." For the first time in 12 years, Lucas Carter felt like he wasn't fighting alone. Emily was discharged at 6 in the morning. The fever had broken around 4:30, and by the time the sun started bleeding pale light through the hospital windows, she was sitting up asking for pancakes. Lucas carried her to the car through snow that had finally stopped falling. The parking lot was a maze of white mounds and abandoned vehicles. His Camry was buried under 8 inches, and it took him 10 minutes of scraping with a broken ice scraper to clear enough glass to see through. Ava followed them out. She'd been silent for the last hour, hunched over her laptop in the corner of the observation room, fingers flying across the keyboard. Now she stood beside her car, a black Tesla that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never experienced winter, and watched Lucas buckle Emily into the back seat. "I'll meet you at your place," Ava said. Lucas paused. "You know where I live?" "I'm your CEO. I know everything." "Former CEO?" Lucas corrected. "I quit, remember?" Ava's expression didn't change. "We'll talk about that later." She got into her Tesla and pulled out of the parking lot without waiting for a response. Lucas sat in the driver's seat and watched her taillights disappear into the gray morning. Emily was already asleep again in the back, her head tilted against the window. He could see her breath fogging the glass. He started the engine and followed. The roads were better now. Plows had been through, carving narrow channels through the snow. Lucas drove carefully, keeping his speed low, his eyes on the slush-covered asphalt. His mind was somewhere else. Richard Brennan. Lucas had worked under Richard for 5 years. The man had taught him half of what he knew about system architecture. He'd recommended Lucas for the lead engineer position. He'd been at Emily's 4th birthday party, for crying out loud, wearing a ridiculous paper hat and helping her blow out the candles. And now he was selling the company out from under them. Lucas's hands tightened on the wheel. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his small rental house on the east side of town, Ava was already there. She was sitting in her car with the engine running, staring at her phone. When Lucas parked, she got out and walked toward him. "Nice place," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Lucas looked at the house. It was a 2-bedroom rancher with peeling paint and a sagging gutter. The front lawn was buried under snow, but in the summer it was mostly weeds. He paid $900 a month for it, which was a miracle in this market, but it still felt like throwing money into a hole. "It's what I can afford," Lucas said. Ava didn't respond. Lucas carried Emily inside and laid her on the couch. She stirred but didn't wake. He covered her with a blanket and turned the thermostat up. The furnace kicked on with a rattle that sounded expensive. Ava stood in the doorway looking around. The living room was cluttered with Emily's toys, stuffed animals, coloring books, a plastic kitchen set that took up half the floor. The TV was on mute, playing some cartoon Lucas didn't recognize. The coffee table was covered in mail he hadn't opened. "You want coffee?" Lucas asked. "I brought my own." Ava held up a stainless steel tumbler that probably cost more than Lucas's monthly grocery budget. Lucas went into the kitchen and started a pot anyway. He needed something to do with his hands. Ava followed him. She set her laptop on the kitchen table and opened it. "We need to move fast. Richard doesn't know we're onto him yet, but that won't last. Once he realizes the logs have been accessed, he'll start covering his tracks." Lucas poured water into the coffee maker. "What's the plan?" "We go to the board, show them the emails, the server logs, the IP trail, everything. And you think they'll believe us?" Ava looked up. "Why wouldn't they?" Lucas turned to face her. "Because Richard's been with the company for 8 years. He's got relationships, allies. We show up with accusations and no hard evidence beyond some emails that could be faked, and it's going to look like we're the ones trying to cover our asses." "What?" Ava frowned. "The emails aren't faked. I know that. You know that. But we need proof that will hold up under scrutiny. We need something undeniable." Ava leaned back in her chair. "What do you suggest?" Lucas poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "We need access to Richard's workstation, his personal files. If he's been planning this for months, there's going to be a trail. Communications, documents, maybe even financial records if he's already taken payments. Breaking into his office is illegal. So is corporate espionage." Ava considered this. "Even if we get into his office, his workstation is encrypted. We'd need his password." Lucas took a sip of coffee. It was terrible. He'd bought the cheapest brand at the grocery store. "I can get past the encryption." "How?" "Because I designed the security protocols for the entire office network. I know where the back doors are." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You built back doors into our security system?" "Every good engineer does. It's for emergencies." "This feels like an abuse of trust." Lucas almost laughed. "You're joking, right? The guy who mentored me is selling us out to a competitor and you're worried about trust?" Ava didn't respond. Lucas set his cup down. "Look, if you've got a better idea, I'm all ears. But if we're going to do this, we need to do it today, before Richard has a chance to disappear." "Yeah. Ava stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Fine. But we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks." "Agreed." From the living room, Emily coughed. Lucas stood up immediately and went to check on her. She was still asleep, her breathing even. He adjusted the blanket and sat on the edge of the couch for a moment, just watching her. When he returned to the kitchen, Ava was on her phone. I'm calling in a favor, she said. I've got a contact in building security. He owes me. He can get us into the office without triggering any alarms. When? Tonight, after hours. The building will be empty because of the holiday. Lucas nodded. What about Emily? Ava looked up. What about her? I can't just leave her here alone. Don't you have someone who can watch her? A babysitter? Lucas felt his jaw tighten. My usual sitter is out of town for Christmas, and I'm not exactly swimming in backup options. Ava set her phone down. So bring her. Bring her to a break-in. It's not a break-in, it's accessing company property that we both have legal clearance to enter. Technically. That's a stretch. Do you have a better option? Lucas didn't. He looked at Emily, still asleep on the couch, and felt the weight of every decision he'd made in the last 12 hours pressing down on him. Fine, he said. But if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you. Ava almost smiled. Noted. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Ava pulled up building schematics on her laptop. Lucas walked her through the network architecture, explaining where Richard's workstation was located and how they could access it without leaving a digital trail. It was strange working with Ava like this. Lucas had been in hundreds of meetings with her over the years, but those had always been formal, structured. She would sit at the head of the table and deliver directives with the kind of cold precision that made people afraid to ask follow-up questions. But here, in his cramped kitchen, with the broken tile and the leaking faucet, she was different. She listened when he talked. She asked questions that weren't accusations. She even made a joke at one point, though it was so dry Lucas almost missed it. Around noon, Emily woke up. Daddy? Lucas went to her immediately. Hey, Bug, how are you feeling? Better. She sat up and looked around. Where are we? Home. You were sick, remember? We went to the hospital. Emily nodded slowly. Then she noticed Ava standing in the kitchen doorway. Who's that? Lucas hesitated. That's Miss Sinclair. She's she works with me. Worked, Ava corrected. Emily looked at her with the kind of unfiltered curiosity only 6-year-olds could manage. You're pretty. Ava blinked. Thank you. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Lucas felt his face heat up. No, definitely not. Why not? Because we just work together, Bug. That's all, say. Emily seemed to accept this. She slid off the couch and walked over to Ava. Do you want to see my drawings? Ava looked genuinely unsure how to respond. Sure. Emily grabbed her hand and dragged her into the hallway. Lucas followed, half amused and half horrified. Emily's room was a disaster. Clothes everywhere. Books stacked in uneven piles. A half-finished puzzle spread across the floor. But on the walls were dozens of drawings, taped up in no particular order. Crayon landscapes, marker portraits, watercolor blobs that might have been animals. Emily pointed to one. That's you and me at the park, Daddy. Lucas looked at the drawing. 2 stick figures standing under a blue scribble that was probably a sky. One big, one small. It's beautiful, Bug. Emily turned to Ava. Do you have kids? No. Why not? Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. Lucas could see her searching for an answer. Finally, she said, I've been very busy with work. That's what Daddy always says. Lucas felt something twist in his chest. Emily lost interest and started showing Ava her stuffed animals. Ava listened politely, though Lucas could tell she was completely out of her depth. After a few minutes, Lucas intervened. Okay, Bug, let's let Miss Sinclair get back to work. How about some lunch? Can I have macaroni and cheese? Sure. Emily ran toward the kitchen. Lucas and Ava followed. As Lucas pulled a box of macaroni from the cupboard, Ava said quietly, She's a good kid. Yeah, she is. You're doing this alone? Lucas nodded. Her mom left when Emily was 2. Haven't heard from her since. Ava was silent for a moment. Then she said, That must be hard. It is. Lucas filled a pot with water and set it on the stove. But it's worth it. Ava didn't respond. She just stood there, watching him cook, her expression unreadable. They ate lunch together. Emily chattered the whole time, telling Ava about school and her best friend Mia and the hamster in her classroom named Mr. Whiskers. Ava listened, nodding at appropriate moments, though Lucas could tell she had no idea how to talk to a 6-year-old. After lunch, Emily curled up on the couch to watch cartoons. Lucas and Ava returned to the kitchen. We should leave around 8, Ava said. The building will be empty by then. Lucas glanced at Emily. I'll need to pack a bag for her. Snacks, tablet, something to keep her occupied. You're really bringing her? I don't have a choice. Ava looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Lucas tried to rest, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He kept thinking about Richard, about the emails, about what would happen if they got caught. Around 6, his phone rang. It was Marcus. Lucas almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hey, Lucas, man, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I've been dealing with some stuff. Is Emily okay? She's fine. It was just the flu. Marcus exhaled. Good. That's good. There was a pause. Look, I don't know what happened between you and Ava, but the whole office is losing their minds. The system's back online, but barely. We're running on duct tape and prayers. How'd you get it back up? Richard stepped in, spent all night rebuilding the authentication modules from scratch. He's being hailed as a hero. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Richard fixed it? Yeah, why? Lucas's mind raced. If Richard had fixed the system, that meant he had access to everything. He could erase the evidence, rewrite the logs, cover his tracks. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to pull the server logs from last night, before Richard touched anything, and I need you to send them to me. Now. Lucas, I can't just... Marcus, please. I can't explain right now, but I need you to trust me. There was a long silence. Then Marcus said, Fine, but you owe me an explanation. I will, I promise. Marcus hung up. Lucas turned to Ava. We've got a problem. Ava looked up from her laptop. What? Well, Richard fixed the system, which means he's had access to everything for the last 12 hours. He could have already erased the evidence. Ava's face went pale. Are you sure? No, but we need to assume the worst. Ava stood up. Then we go now. We don't wait until tonight. The building's still going to have people in it. I don't care. If Richard's covering his tracks, we're running out of time. Lucas looked at Emily, asleep on the couch. Okay, he said. Let's go. They left 20 minutes later. Lucas carried Emily to the car, still wrapped in her blanket. She woke up halfway through the drive and asked where they were going. Daddy has to pick something up from work, Lucas said. It'll be quick. Emily accepted this without question and went back to sleep. The office building was a 15-story glass monolith on the north side of downtown. Lucas had spent more hours inside it than he cared to count. He knew every floor, every hallway, every broken vending machine. Ava parked in the underground garage. The security guard at the entrance waved her through without a second glance. See? Ava said. No alarms. Lucas wasn't convinced. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallways were quiet but not empty. A few engineers were still at their desks, headphones on, staring at screens. Lucas kept his head down and walked quickly. Richard's office was at the end of the hall. The door was closed. Ava tried the handle. Locked. Now what? She whispered. Lucas pulled out his key card. I still have building access. Technically. He swiped the card. The lock clicked open. They stepped inside. Richard's office was immaculate. Everything had a place. The desk was clear except for a single monitor and a coffee mug that said, World's Best Boss. The bookshelves were lined with technical manuals and industry awards. Lucas sat down at the desk and woke up the computer. A login screen appeared. Can you get past it? Ava asked. Lucas pulled out a USB drive from his pocket. I came prepared. He plugged the drive into the computer and ran a script. The screen flickered, then the login screen disappeared. We're in, Lucas said. Ava leaned over his shoulder. What are we looking for? Anything that connects him to the competitor. Emails, financial records, communication logs. Lucas started searching. He pulled up Richard's email client and scanned through the folders. There were thousands of messages. He filtered by date, then by recipient. Nothing. He tried the file directory, documents, spreadsheets, presentations. Still nothing. He wiped it, Lucas said. It's all gone. Ava's face hardened. Check the recycle bin. Lucas did. Empty. What about cloud backups? Ava asked. Lucas pulled up the backup logs. They'd been deleted. He's thorough, Lucas muttered. Ava slammed her hand on the desk. There has to be something. Lucas leaned back in the chair, thinking. Richard was smart. Too smart to leave obvious evidence. But everyone made mistakes. Then Lucas remembered something. The network logs, he said. What about them? Every device that connects to the office network leaves a record, even personal devices. If Richard was communicating with the competitor from inside the building, there'll be a trace. Lucas opened a terminal window and accessed the network server. He pulled up the connection logs for the last 6 months and started filtering. There. A device labeled RB-personal-iPhone had connected to the network 47 times in the last 3 months. Each connection lasted between 15 and 30 minutes. Lucas cross-referenced the timestamps with Richard's calendar. Every connection occurred during late-night hours when Richard was supposedly working alone. He was using his personal phone, Lucas said, probably because he knew the company monitors work devices. Ava leaned in. Can you see what he was doing? Not exactly, but I can see what servers he was accessing. Lucas pulled up the server access logs. Richard's phone had connected to an external email server. The domain was registered to a shell company. Lucas ran a Hui lookup on the domain. The registration led back to Cordyne Technologies. Ava inhaled sharply. That's our competitor. Lucas nodded. He's been communicating with them for months. Can we prove it? Lucas copied the logs onto his USB drive. This is proof. It's not a smoking gun, but combined with the emails you found, it's enough to open an investigation. Ava straightened. Then let's get out of here before someone... The door opened. Richard Brennan stood in the doorway. For a moment, no one moved. Richard looked at Lucas, then at Ava, then at the computer screen. What are you doing in my office? He said quietly. Lucas stood up. We know what you did. Richard's expression didn't change. I have no idea what you're talking about. The system failure, Ava said. The sabotage. The deal with Cordyne. We have proof. Richard closed the door behind him. You have logs that show I accessed the network from my personal phone. That's not proof of anything. It's enough, Lucas said. Richard smiled. It was a cold smile. No, it's not. And even if it was, do you really think the board is going to believe you? A disgraced engineer who quit in the middle of a crisis, and a CEO who can't control her own team. Ava's jaw tightened. You won't get away with this. I already have, Richard said. The system's fixed, the company's stable, and I'm the one who saved it. You two, you're just noise. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest. You framed me. I gave you an opportunity to prove yourself. You failed. Because I was taking care of my daughter. Richard shrugged. Not my problem. Lucas took a step forward. Ava put a hand on his arm. We're leaving, she said. And we're taking this to the board. Richard laughed. Good luck with that. Lucas and Ava walked toward the door. Richard didn't move. As they passed him, Richard said, You should have stayed in your lane, Lucas. You were good at what you did, but you were never going to be more than a code monkey. And now, you're nothing. Lucas stopped. He turned, and he punched Richard Brennan in the face. Richard stumbled backward, clutching his nose. Blood seeped through his fingers. You... Lucas didn't wait to hear the rest. He grabbed Ava's hand and ran. They sprinted down the hallway, past startled engineers toward the elevator. Lucas's heart was pounding. His knuckles were throbbing. What the hell were you thinking? Ava hissed. I wasn't. They reached the elevator. Lucas jabbed the button. The doors opened immediately. They stepped inside. As the doors closed, Lucas saw Richard stumbling out of his office, shouting something Lucas couldn't hear. The elevator descended. Lucas leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Ava stared at him. You just assaulted a senior executive. I know. That's a felony. I know. Ava started laughing. It was a short, incredulous laugh. You're insane. Probably. The elevator reached the garage. They ran to Ava's car. Emily was awake in the back seat, clutching her tablet. Daddy, what's wrong? Nothing, Bug. Everything's fine. Ava started the engine and peeled out of the garage. Lucas looked back at the building, half expecting security to chase them. No one did. Ava drove in silence for 5 minutes. Then she said, "We need a new plan." Lucas nodded. "I know. Because that plan was terrible." "I know." Ava glanced at him. "But we got the logs, so it wasn't a total disaster." Lucas looked down at the USB drive in his hand. "Yeah," he said. "We got the logs." "Yeah." They drove for 20 minutes without speaking. Ava kept checking the rearview mirror like she expected police cars to materialize out of the gray afternoon. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, staring at his knuckles. They were already starting to swell. Emily had her headphones on, watching something on her tablet. She hadn't asked any more questions. Finally, Ava pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and vinyl booths that had seen better decades. "Why are we stopping?" Lucas asked. "Because we need to think," Ava said. "And I need coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a gym sock." Lucas almost smiled. They went inside. The diner was nearly empty. A tired-looking waitress with a name tag that said Deb gestured toward a booth by the window. They sat down. Emily immediately grabbed a laminated menu and started studying it with intense focus. "Can I get pancakes?" she asked. "You just had lunch," Lucas said, "but I'm hungry again." Lucas looked at Ava. She shrugged. "Fine," Lucas said. "Pancakes." Deb came over and took their order. 2 coffees, 1 hot chocolate, pancakes for Emily. Lucas wasn't hungry, but Ava ordered a sandwich anyway and told him he needed to eat something. When Deb left, Ava pulled out her laptop and set it on the table. "We need to figure out our next move," she said. Lucas looked around the diner. There was an old man at the counter reading a newspaper. A couple in the corner booth having a quiet argument. No one was paying attention to them. "We can't go to the board," Lucas said. "Not yet. Richard's right. We don't have enough. We have the network logs, which show he accessed the network from his personal phone. That's it. There's no smoking gun. No explicit proof he was communicating with Cordine. Just circumstantial evidence that any halfway decent lawyer will tear apart." Ava frowned. "So what do you suggest?" Lucas thought for a moment. "We need to get him to incriminate himself, on record." "How?" "We set up a meeting. Tell him we want to make a deal. We'll keep quiet about what we found in exchange for something. Money, maybe. Or a severance package." Ava stared at him. "You want to blackmail him?" "I want to get him talking. If we can record him admitting to the sabotage, that's all the proof we need. Recording someone without their consent is illegal." Lucas gave her a look. "So is punching your VP of engineering in the face, but I didn't hear you complaining in the car." Ava's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair point." Deb returned with their drinks. Emily immediately started blowing on her hot chocolate, sending tiny ripples across the surface. Lucas took a sip of coffee. It was actually pretty good. Ava opened her laptop and pulled up a document. "If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. We set up the meeting somewhere public, somewhere with security cameras. That way, even if the audio recording gets thrown out, we'll have video evidence of the conversation." "Where?" "The office cafeteria. It's open 24 hours during the holiday shutdown for the skeleton crew. Cameras everywhere. And it's neutral ground. Richard won't suspect anything." Lucas nodded slowly. "Okay, but we need leverage. Something to make him think we're serious about making a deal." Ava thought for a moment. Then she pulled up the email thread they'd found earlier. "We tell him we have copies of his communications with Cordine. We don't tell him we only have fragments. We let him think we have everything. He'll want proof. So we show him one email, just enough to make him nervous. Then we tell him there's more, and we're willing to bury it if he cooperates." Lucas considered this. It was risky. If Richard called their bluff, they had nothing. But if it worked, they'd have everything they needed. "All right, Lucas said. "Let's do it." Ava pulled out her phone and started typing. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked. "Sending Richard a message, setting up the meeting. Right now, the longer we wait, the more time he has to cover his tracks, or to come after us." Lucas glanced at Emily. She was building a tower out of creamer cups, completely absorbed. "Okay," he said quietly. Ava finished typing and hit send. Then she set her phone on the table and they waited. 30 seconds later, it buzzed. Ava read the message. He's in, 9 p.m. tonight, cafeteria. Lucas felt his stomach tighten. That's in 4 hours, which gives us 4 hours to prepare. Emily's pancakes arrived. She attacked them with the kind of enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. Lucas watched her eat and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong tonight. Ava was typing on her laptop again, pulling up floor plans and camera placements. She worked with the same focused intensity she brought to every board meeting, every product launch, every crisis. Lucas had always found it intimidating. Now, sitting across from her in a dingy diner booth, he found it oddly reassuring. "You're really good at this," he said. Ava looked up. "At what?" "The strategy, the planning. You think like a chess player." "Yas." "Ma, I am a chess player. I was ranked in the top 100 nationally when I was 16. "Of course you were." Ava almost smiled. "What about you? What were you doing at 16? Lucas thought back. Building computers in my garage. Teaching myself to code. Trying to impress a girl named Sarah Patterson who didn't know I existed. Did it work? The coding or the girl? Either. The coding, yes. The girl, no. She ended up dating the quarterback. Cliché, I know. Well, Ava closed her laptop. For what it's worth, I think she missed out. Lucas wasn't sure how to respond to that. He took another sip of coffee and changed the subject. "So what's the plan for Emily?" "What do you mean?" "I can't bring her to this meeting. It's too dangerous." Ava frowned. "Don't you have anyone who can watch her?" Lucas felt a familiar frustration rising. "I already told you my sitter's out of town, and I don't have family in the area. It's just me. What about friends?" Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "When do you think I have time for friends? I work 60-hour weeks and spend every other waking moment taking care of a 6-year-old. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll watch her." Lucas blinked. "What?" "During the meeting. I'll stay with Emily. You go in and handle Richard." "Ava, you're the CEO. This whole thing is happening because of you. You need to be there." "No. You need to be there. You're the one who knows the technical details. You're the one who can call him out if he tries to lie about the system architecture. I'm just..." She trailed off. "Just what?" "Just the person who got you into this mess." Lucas stared at her. "You didn't get me into anything. Richard did, and I chose to help you. No one forced me." Ava looked down at her laptop. "I shouldn't have called you that night, when the system went down. I shouldn't have threatened you. No, you shouldn't have. I was scared. The company was collapsing and I didn't know what to do. I lashed out at the first person I could blame." Lucas leaned back in the booth. "You want to know what the worst part was? It wasn't the threat. It was realizing that after 12 years of working myself to death, I was still just a replaceable part in a machine. That's what you made me feel like." Ava met his eyes. "I'm sorry." It was the first time Lucas had heard her apologize for anything, ever. "I'm sorry too," he said, "for punching Richard. That was stupid." "It was extremely stupid, but it felt really good." Ava laughed, actually laughed. It was a surprised, genuine sound that Lucas had never heard from her before. Emily looked up from her pancakes. "What's funny?" "Nothing, Bug," Lucas said. "Finish your food." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the sun was starting to set. The sky was turning that particular shade of winter gray that made everything look washed out and tired. Finally, Ava said, "I'll watch Emily, but you wear a wire. I want to hear everything that happens in that meeting." "Where are we going to get a wire?" Ava pulled out her phone. "I know a guy." Of course she did. They left the diner an hour later. Ava drove them to a small electronics shop in a strip mall on the south side of town. The sign out front said Mike's Audio and Surveillance in letters that had faded to almost nothing. Inside, the shop was crammed with equipment: cameras, microphones, cables, screens. A man in his 50s with a gray ponytail and a Black Sabbath t-shirt looked up from behind the counter. "Ava Sinclair, he said. "Been a while." "Hi, Mike. What brings you to my humble establishment?" Ava glanced at Lucas. "We need a recording set up. Something small, undetectable." Mike raised an eyebrow. This for work or pleasure? Does it matter? Oh, not to me, but it'll affect what I recommend. Mike came around the counter and started pulling equipment off the shelves. If you want clean audio in a noisy environment, you're looking at a lavalier mic with a digital recorder. I've got a model that's about the size of a pack of gum. Battery life is 6 hours. Audio quality is good enough for court, if that's what you're worried about. How much? Lucas asked. For Ava, $200, cash. Hey. Lucas pulled out his wallet. He had $83. Ava handed Mike $300 bills. Keep the change. Mike grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. He walked them through the setup. The microphone clipped to Lucas's collar, hidden under his shirt. The recorder went in his jacket pocket. Mike did a test recording and played it back. The audio was crystal clear. Just don't get it wet, Mike said, and don't let anyone pat you down. Noted, Lucas said. They left the shop as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon. Emily had fallen asleep in the back seat again. Lucas watched her through the rear-view mirror, her small face peaceful in the glow of the streetlights. She sleeps a lot, Ava observed. She's recovering from the flu. Sleep is good. Does she always sleep this much? Lucas glanced at Ava. Why? You planning on having kids? I haven't decided yet. That's a very Ava answer. What's that supposed to mean? It means you approach everything like a business decision. Cost-benefit analysis, risk assessment, 5-year projections. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I never had the luxury of planning. Emily just happened. Her mom got pregnant. We decided to keep the baby, and then she left. There was no strategy, just survival. Do you regret it? Lucas looked at his daughter, sleeping in the back seat. Not for a second. They drove back to Lucas's house. Ava parked in the driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of them moved. What time do you need to leave? Ava asked. Lucas checked his phone. Meeting's at 9. I should get there by 8:30 to set up. That gives us 2 hours. You don't have to do this, Lucas said. Watch Emily, I can figure something out. Like what? Lucas didn't have an answer. I'm staying, Ava said firmly. Besides, how hard can it be? Lucas almost laughed. They went inside. Emily woke up as Lucas carried her through the door and immediately asked if she could watch TV. Lucas said yes, mostly because he didn't have the energy to argue. Ava stood in the middle of the living room, looking around like she'd just landed on an alien planet. Lucas realized she'd probably never been in a place like this. Small, messy, lived in. Make yourself at home, Lucas said, though it came out more sarcastic than he intended. Ava sat on the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb the pile of laundry Lucas had meant to fold 3 days ago. Emily climbed up next to her and handed her a stuffed rabbit. This is Mr. Hoppy, Emily said. He's my second favorite. What's your first favorite? Ava asked. Emily held up a worn teddy bear with one eye missing. Mr. Bear. But he's sleeping right now. Ava nodded seriously, like this was important information. Lucas went into the kitchen and started making dinner. Spaghetti. It was one of the 3 meals he knew how to cook. The others were grilled cheese and scrambled eggs. While the water boiled, he checked his phone. There was a text from Marcus. Sent you those logs. What's going on? Lucas didn't respond. He'd explain everything later. If there was a later. He opened the files Marcus had sent. They were massive. Thousands of lines of server activity from the night of the crash. Lucas scrolled through them, looking for anything that stood out. And then he saw it. A command string buried in the middle of the log file. A manual override that triggered a cascading shutdown of the authentication servers. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the timestamp. The override had been executed at 2:51 p.m., 4 minutes after Emily's school had called Lucas. 4 minutes after he'd started packing up to leave. Lucas felt his blood run cold. Richard hadn't just sabotaged the system. He'd timed it specifically to coincide with Lucas leaving the office. He'd known about Emily being sick. Lucas's hands were shaking as he pulled up the company's internal messaging system. He searched Richard's chat history. There it was. A message from Richard to someone in HR, time-stamped at 2:35 p.m. Has Lucas left yet? The response came 2 minutes later. Not yet, still at his desk. Another message from Richard at 2:49 p.m. Now? Just got a call. Leaving now. Lucas felt sick. Richard had been monitoring him, waiting for the exact moment Lucas would be vulnerable. He'd probably bribed someone in the school to call with the emergency. Or maybe he'd just gotten lucky. Either way, it meant Richard had been planning this for longer than they'd thought. Lucas saved the chat logs and copied them to the USB drive. Then he went back into the living room. Ava was sitting on the floor now, helping Emily build a tower out of blocks. She looked completely out of place, her expensive blouse and tailored pants contrasting sharply with the chaos of the room. "Ava," Lucas said quietly. She looked up. "I found something." But Lucas showed her the logs, the timestamp, the chat messages. Ava's face went pale. "He set you up." "Yeah." That means he knew Emily was sick before the system went down. Lucas nodded. "He's been watching me, waiting for an opportunity." Emily looked up from her blocks. "Are you talking about me?" "No, Bug," Lucas said quickly. "Just boring work stuff." Emily seemed satisfied with this and went back to building. Ava stood up and walked into the kitchen. Lucas followed. "This changes everything," she said. "If Richard was monitoring you, he could still be monitoring you now. He might know we went to his office. He might know we have the logs. Then why agree to the meeting?" Ava thought for a moment. "Because he's confident. He thinks he's covered all his bases. Or what? Or it's a trap." Lucas felt his stomach drop. "You think he's setting us up?" "I think it's possible. We need to be careful." Well, Lucas looked at the clock. 7:15. 1 hour and 15 minutes until the meeting. "Maybe we should call it off," he said. "And do what? Wait for Richard to finish covering his tracks? Wait for him to come after us? We could go to the police. With what evidence? Chat logs that could be faked? Network records that prove nothing? We need a confession, Lucas. It's the only way." Lucas knew she was right, but that didn't make it any easier. "Okay," he said, "but if anything feels wrong, I'm walking out. I'm not dying for this company." "Agreed." They ate dinner together. Spaghetti with jarred sauce that Lucas had doctored up with garlic and basil. Emily talked non-stop about school and Christmas, and whether Santa was real because her friend Tyler said he wasn't, but she wasn't sure. Ava listened to all of it with an expression that was somewhere between bewildered and fascinated. After dinner, Lucas gave Emily a bath and got her into pajamas. By the time he came back downstairs, it was 8 o'clock. Ava was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. "Everything okay?" Lucas asked. "I just got a message from the board. They want an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the system failure and the company's response." "What are you going to tell them?" "Depends on what happens tonight." Lucas sat down next to her. "Are you scared?" Ava looked at him, terrified. "Good. Me too." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind was picking up. Lucas could hear it rattling the windows. "I should go," he said finally. Ava nodded. "Be careful." Lucas stood up and grabbed his jacket. He checked the recording equipment one more time. The microphone was hidden. The recorder was charged. Emily ran down the stairs and threw her arms around his legs. "Where are you going, Daddy?" "Just to work for a little bit. Miss Sinclair's going to stay with you. Will you be back soon?" "Before you know it, Bug." Emily looked up at him with those big brown eyes that always made him feel like he was failing at something. "Promise?" "Promise." He kissed the top of her head and walked toward the door. "Lucas," Ava called. He turned. "If anything goes wrong, run. Don't try to be a hero." "Wasn't planning on it." Lucas walked out into the cold night air. The temperature had dropped again. His breath came out in white clouds. He got into the Camry and started the engine. The drive to the office took 15 minutes. The streets were mostly empty. Christmas lights glowed in windows. Inflatable Santas drooped in front yards. Lucas pulled into this parking garage at 8:40. He sat in the car for a moment, gathering himself. Then he got out and walked toward the building. The lobby was empty except for a security guard Lucas didn't recognize. The guard barely looked up as Lucas swiped his badge and walked through. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer than usual. Lucas watched the numbers tick upward and tried to steady his breathing. The doors opened. The hallway was dark except for the emergency exit signs. Lucas's footsteps echoed on the tile floor. The cafeteria was at the end of the hall. The lights were on inside, casting a yellow glow through the glass doors. Lucas pushed through and stepped inside. The cafeteria was exactly as he remembered it. Rows of tables, a serving line with sneeze guards, vending machines against the far wall, and cameras. At least 6 of them, positioned in the corners of the room. Richard was already there. He sat at a table in the middle of the room, hands folded in front of him. His nose was bandaged, but otherwise he looked calm, composed. Lucas walked over and sat down across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard said, "You broke my nose." "Yeah, sorry about that." "No, you're not." "No, I'm not." Richard smiled. It was the same cold smile from his office. "So, you wanted to make a deal." Lucas pulled out his phone and set it on the table. On the screen was one of the emails they'd found, the one discussing Cordyne's acquisition timeline. Richard glanced at it. His expression didn't change. "Where did you get that?" "Your office, this afternoon, before I punched you." "That's corporate espionage. So is selling proprietary information to a competitor." Richard leaned back in his chair. "What do you want, Lucas?" "I want you to admit what you did, Pete." "And why would I do that?" Lucas pulled out the USB drive and set it next to his phone. "Because I have copies of everything, your emails, the network logs, the chat messages where you tracked my movements, all of it." Richard's smile faltered, just for a second. "You're bluffing. Am I?" Lucas opened another file on his phone, the chat logs. He turned the screen toward Richard. Richard read them. His jaw tightened. "That doesn't prove anything. It's deeper said. It proves you were monitoring me. It proves you knew about Emily being sick, and it proves you timed the system failure to coincide with me leaving the office. Circumstantial, maybe. But combined with the emails and the network logs, it's enough to open an investigation. And once that happens, your deal with Cordyne falls apart. They're not going to hire someone under federal investigation for corporate espionage." Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "How much do you want?" Lucas felt a surge of satisfaction. "I don't want your money." "Then what?" "I want you to confess, on record. I want you to admit that you sabotaged the system, that you framed me, and that you were planning to sell the company out." Richard laughed. "You're insane." "Maybe, but I'm also the only thing standing between you and a very public trial." Richard stood up. "You have nothing. Those emails can be explained. The logs can be challenged. And chat messages? Please, you think any court is going to take that seriously?" Lucas stood up too. "Then why are you here? If I have nothing, why show up at all?" Richard's face hardened. "Because I wanted to see your face when I told you that you're finished. You're never working in this industry again. I'll make sure of it." "You already tried that, remember? When you sabotaged the system and blamed it on me? I didn't sabotage anything. The system failed because of your incompetent code. I just took advantage of the situation." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. "So you admit you took advantage?" Richard realized his mistake. He opened his mouth to backtrack, but Lucas kept going. "You admit you knew the system was going to fail. You admit you timed it to make me look bad. You admit you used it to position yourself as the hero." "That's not what I said." "That's exactly what you said, and it's all on record." Richard's eyes flicked to Lucas's collar, to the small microphone clipped there. His face went white. "You're wearing a wire," Richard said slowly. Lucas didn't respond. Richard's expression shifted from shock to rage. He lunged across the table, grabbing for Lucas's collar. Lucas stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. Richard followed, his hands closing around the microphone. They crashed into a table. Lucas shoved Richard away, but Richard came back swinging. His fist caught Lucas in the jaw, snapping his head to the side. Lucas tasted blood. He swung back, catching Richard in the ribs. Richard grunted and grabbed Lucas's jacket, trying to rip the recording equipment off. They fell to the floor, grappling. Lucas's head hit the tile hard enough to make his vision blur. Richard's hands found the microphone and yanked it free, wires tearing. "You think you're smart?" Richard hissed. "You think you can outsmart me?" Lucas drove his knee up into Richard's stomach. Richard rolled off, gasping. Lucas scrambled to his feet, reaching for his phone. Richard grabbed his ankle and pulled. Lucas went down again, his phone skittering across the floor. And then the cafeteria doors burst open. Two security guards rushed in, followed by Ava. "Stop!" one of the guards shouted. Richard let go of Lucas and stood up, hands raised. "He attacked me. I was defending myself." Lucas pushed himself up, wiping blood from his mouth. The microphone was destroyed. The wires hung from his collar like broken veins. Ava looked at Lucas, then at Richard. "Is that true?" "He's lying," Lucas said. "He destroyed the wire. I got him to admit—" "You got nothing," Richard interrupted. "Just some vague statements that prove nothing, and now you've assaulted me. Again." The security guards looked uncertain. Ava pulled out her phone. "I heard everything." Richard frowned. "What?" The wire was transmitting to my phone. I recorded the whole conversation. Ava turned her phone toward the security guards. Lucas could hear his own voice playing back, tinny, through the speaker. "You admit you took advantage." Then Richard's voice. "I didn't sabotage anything. The system failed because of your incompetent code. I just took advantage of the situation." The guards looked at Richard. Richard's face went pale. "That's illegal. You can't record someone without their consent." "Actually," Ava said calmly, "in this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording, and Lucas consented." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Ava looked at the guards. "Call the police. I want this man arrested for assault, corporate espionage, and sabotage." One of the guards pulled out his radio. Richard looked at Ava, then at Lucas. For the first time, Lucas saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. "You don't understand," Richard said. "The company was failing. Ava was making bad decisions. I was trying to save it. By selling it to our competitor?" Ava said coldly. "By destroying Lucas's career by putting 3 million users at risk?" "I did what I had to do." "No. You did what benefited you, and now you're going to pay for it." The police arrived 12 minutes later. They put Richard in handcuffs right there in the cafeteria. He didn't resist, didn't say anything, just stared at the floor while one of the officers read him his rights in that flat, practiced monotone cops use when they've done something 1,000 times. Lucas watched from across the room, sitting on the edge of a table with an ice pack pressed to his jaw. One of the security guards had gotten it from the break room freezer. It was the kind with the cartoon penguin on the front, meant for kids' lunchboxes. Ava stood beside him, her phone still in her hand. The recording had stopped playing, but Lucas could still hear Richard's voice in his head. "I just took advantage of the situation." 5 words. That was all it took. The second officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, approached Lucas and Ava. "We're going to need statements from both of you," she said. "And we'll need that recording." Ava handed over her phone. "I can send you a copy." "We'll need the original file, chain of custody." "Of course." The officer looked at Lucas. "You want to press charges for assault?" Lucas glanced at Richard, still standing between the two officers, his head down. "Yeah," Lucas said. "I do." The officer nodded and made a note on her pad. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. Bring any evidence you have. Emails, logs, whatever." "We will," Ava said. They took Richard away. He didn't look at Lucas or Ava as they walked him out. The cafeteria doors swung shut behind them, and then it was just Lucas, Ava, and the 2 security guards who'd witnessed everything. One of the guards cleared his throat. "You two should probably go home. We'll file a report about what happened here." Lucas nodded. He stood up, wincing. His jaw throbbed. His ribs hurt. His knuckles from earlier were swollen and starting to bruise in interesting colors. Ava touched his arm. "Can you walk?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I've looked worse." That wasn't true, but Lucas didn't feel like admitting how much everything hurt. They walked out of the building together. The parking garage was cold and empty. Their footsteps echoed off the concrete. When they reached Ava's car, she stopped. "Thank you," she said. Lucas looked at her. "For what?" "For not backing down. For seeing this through." "I didn't have much choice." "You had every choice. You could have walked away after you quit. You could have let Richard bury you and moved on with your life." Lucas shook his head. "He tried to destroy me, tried to use my daughter as leverage. I wasn't going to let that stand." Ava was quiet for a moment, then she said, I meant what I said before, about being sorry. I pushed you too hard. I treated you like a resource instead of a person. And I'm sorry. Lucas didn't know what to say. Apologies from Ava Sinclair were apparently becoming a regular thing tonight. It's okay, he said finally. It's not, but I appreciate you saying that. They got into the car. Ava started the engine but didn't put it in gear. What happens now? Lucas asked. Now we go back to your house, check on Emily, and tomorrow we deal with the board. You think they'll believe us? With the recording? With Richard's arrest? They won't have a choice. Lucas leaned his head back against the seat. What about me? I still quit, remember? Ava put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space. We'll figure something out. They drove through the empty streets. The city looked different at night, quieter, almost peaceful. When they got back to Lucas's house, all the lights were on. Lucas felt a spike of panic until he walked in and saw Emily asleep on the couch, Mr. Bear clutched to her chest. The TV was still playing cartoons. Ava stood in the doorway, looking exhausted. Her hair had come loose from its usual perfect arrangement. Her blouse was wrinkled. She looked more human than Lucas had ever seen her. How'd it go? Lucas asked quietly. She wanted to play restaurant. I was the customer. She made me pretend to eat invisible food for 45 minutes. Lucas smiled despite everything. Sounds about right. Then she asked me approximately 600 questions about why the sky is blue, where babies come from, and whether aliens are real. What'd you tell her? The truth. I have no idea. Lucas laughed. It hurt his jaw, but he couldn't help it. Ava walked over to the couch and looked down at Emily. She's a good kid, Lucas. You're doing a good job. Thanks. Most days it doesn't feel like it. That's because you're doing it alone. No one's meant to do this alone. Lucas didn't have a response to that. Ava grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. I should go. You need rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Ava? She turned. Thank you. For watching her. For everything. Ava nodded. Get some sleep, Lucas. She left. Lucas stood in the quiet living room for a moment, listening to Emily breathe and the distant sound of Ava's car pulling out of the driveway. Then he carried Emily upstairs to bed. The next morning came too fast. Lucas woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds and Emily jumping on his bed. Daddy, wake up! It's Christmas Eve! Lucas groaned and checked his phone. 7:30. He'd gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep. Come on, Bug. Let me sleep a little longer. But we have to make cookies. You promised. Had he promised that? Lucas honestly couldn't remember. The last few days were a blur of hospitals and confrontations in police stations. Okay, he said, hauling himself out of bed. Cookies. Let's do it. His jaw still hurt, his ribs still hurt, everything hurt. But Emily was bouncing around the room with so much energy that Lucas couldn't help but smile. They went downstairs and made chocolate chip cookies from a pre-made tube of dough Lucas found in the back of the fridge. Emily insisted on doing most of the work herself, which meant the cookies ended up in weird shapes and sizes. Some were burnt, some were raw in the middle, but Emily was proud of every single one. While the last batch was baking, Lucas's phone rang. Ava. Hey, Lucas answered. Board meeting is at noon. Can you be there? Lucas looked at Emily, who was carefully arranging cookies on a plate. I don't know. I'd need to find someone to watch Emily. Bring her. To a board meeting? We have a conference room with a TV and some toys left over from a Bring Your Kid to Work day last year. She can hang out there while we meet with the board. Lucas hesitated. Are you sure? I'm sure. Lucas, you need to be there. This is your vindication too. Okay, we'll be there. He hung up and looked at Emily. How would you like to come to Daddy's office today? Emily's eyes went wide. Really? Really. But you have to be on your best behavior. I'm always on my best behavior. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Okay, sometimes I'm on my best behavior, Emily amended. They got ready and drove to the office. The parking garage was fuller than it had been last night. People were back at work despite the holiday approaching. The tech industry never really stopped. Lucas carried a box of Emily's cookies and held her hand as they walked through the lobby. The same security guard from last night did a double take when he saw Lucas's bruised jaw, but didn't say anything. They took the elevator to the executive floor. Lucas had only been up here a handful of times. It was all glass walls and expensive furniture and abstract art that cost more than his car. Ava met them at the elevator. She was back in CEO mode. Hair perfect, suit immaculate. But when she saw Emily, her expression softened. "Hi, Emily." "Hi, Miss Sinclair. We made cookies." Emily held up the box proudly. Ava opened it and looked at the misshapen, variably cooked cookies inside. "They look delicious," Ava said, and she sounded like she meant it. Ava led them down the hall to a conference room. It was smaller than the main boardroom, but still nicer than anywhere Lucas usually worked. There was a TV mounted on the wall and a bin of toys in the corner. "This okay?" Ava asked Emily. Emily was already pulling toys out of the bin. "It's perfect." Lucas set her up with her tablet and some headphones, plus a few cookies on a napkin. "I'll be right down the hall, okay? If you need anything, you come find me." "Okay, Daddy." Lucas kissed the top of her head and followed Ava out. They walked down the hall to the main boardroom. Through the glass walls, Lucas could see people already gathering. The board members, the company's lawyer, a few senior executives Lucas recognized. "You ready?" Ava asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." They walked in together. The boardroom went quiet. Everyone turned to look at them. Lucas felt suddenly very aware of his bruised jaw, his wrinkled shirt, the fact that he didn't belong in a room like this. At the head of the table sat Martin Chen, the board chairman. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of calm authority that came from decades of running companies. "Ava," Martin said. "Lucas, please, sit." They sat. Lucas noticed several board members staring at him. One woman, Margaret something, looked actively hostile. Martin folded his hands on the table. "I think we all know why we're here. The system failure. Richard Brennan's arrest. The sabotage allegations. This is a crisis, and we need to address it immediately." "Bums." Margaret leaned forward. "I'll say this plainly. The optics are terrible. Our VP of engineering is in jail. Our CEO disappeared during a critical outage, and our lead engineer quit mid-crisis. The media is going to crucify us." "The media doesn't know yet," Ava said calmly. "We have a small window to control the narrative." "Control the narrative? How exactly do you plan to do that?" Ava pulled out her laptop and connected it to the screen at the front of the room. "By telling the truth." Nita cheese. She pulled up the recording from last night. Richard's voice filled the room. "I didn't sabotage anything. The system failed because of your incompetent code. I just took advantage of the situation." The board members listened in silence. When the recording ended, Martin sat back in his chair. "That's damning," he said quietly. "There's more." Ava pulled up the emails, the network logs, the chat messages showing Richard monitoring Lucas. Lucas watched the board members' faces as they processed the information. Shock, anger, disbelief. Margaret was the first to speak. "Even if Richard did sabotage the system, that doesn't excuse the chaos of the last 48 hours. We had a total infrastructure failure during our biggest sale of the year." "Because Richard designed it that way," Lucas said. His voice was rough but steady. "He waited until I had a family emergency. He timed the failure to make me look incompetent and to make Ava look like she couldn't handle a crisis. It was a setup from the beginning." Another board member, a man named David, spoke up. "Can you prove that?" Lucas pulled out the USB drive and slid it across the table. "Every log, every message, every piece of evidence we found. It's all there." Martin picked up the drive and turned it over in his hands. "And the police have all this as well?" "They do," Ava confirmed. "Richard was arrested last night for assault, corporate espionage, and sabotage. He's being held pending arraignment." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Martin said, "What's your recommendation, Ava?" Ava straightened in her chair. "We release a statement today. We tell the truth about what happened. We explain that a senior executive engaged in sabotage and has been arrested. We assure our users that the threat has been neutralized and the system is secure. And we commit to a full third-party security audit to prevent this from happening again." Margaret frowned. "That's going to tank our stock price." "Maybe, or maybe it shows that we're willing to be transparent and hold people accountable." The alternative is to hide this and wait for it to come out anyway when Richard goes to trial. And when it does, it'll look like we were covering it up. David nodded slowly. She has a point. Martin looked at Lucas. What about you? Are you planning to pursue legal action against the company? Lucas hadn't even thought about that. I don't know. I just want my name cleared. If you don't sue us, we'd like to offer you your job back, Martin said, with a significant raise and a formal apology from this board. Lucas blinked. I quit. Under duress, Martin said. Richard manipulated the situation to force you into an impossible choice. We should have protected you. We didn't. That's on us. Lucas looked at Ava. She nodded slightly. Lucas looked. I appreciate that, Lucas said carefully. But I can't go back to the way things were. I can't work 60-hour weeks and miss my daughter's childhood. Not anymore. What if we restructured your roles, Ava said. Made you a senior consultant instead of a full-time engineer. Flexible hours, remote work, projects you choose, better pay. Lucas stared at her. You're serious. Completely. You're good at what you do, Lucas. The company needs people like you. But we need to find a way to make it work for your life, not just ours. Margaret looked skeptical. We're going to set that precedent? Flexible arrangements for everyone? Why not? Ava said. If it means we keep talented people instead of burning them out, yes, let's set that precedent. Martin looked around the table. All in favor of offering Lucas a restructured position as a senior consultant? Hands went up. Not everyone, but enough. Martin nodded. Motion carries. Lucas, the offer stands. Take some time to think about it. Lucas nodded, still processing. The meeting continued for another hour. They discussed the statement, the security audit, the timeline for informing users. Ava fielded questions with the same cool precision Lucas had seen in every meeting, but there was something different now. She listened more. She acknowledged when she didn't have all the answers. When the meeting finally ended, Lucas felt like he'd been wrung out. He and Ava walked back to the conference room where Emily was waiting. She'd made an elaborate city out of building blocks and was narrating an epic story about dragons and princesses to herself. How'd it go? Emily asked, not looking up from her blocks. Good, Bug. Really good. Ava crouched down next to Emily. Those are impressive towers. Thanks. This one is where the dragon lives. He's nice, though, not scary. I like that, Ava said. A nice dragon. They packed up Emily's things and walked to the elevator. As they waited, Ava said, What are you going to tell them? About the job? Yeah, Lucas thought for a moment. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to walk away from all of this. Start fresh somewhere else. And the other part? The other part knows that jobs like that don't exist anywhere else. Flexible hours, remote work, it's unheard of. It should be heard of, Ava said. People have lives, families. We forget that sometimes in this industry. The elevator arrived. They stepped inside. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Sure. Why are you doing this? The restructured position, the flexibility? Is it guilt? Taught. Ava considered the question. Partly. I do feel guilty about how I treated you, but it's also pragmatic. I almost lost the company because I didn't value the people who keep it running. I'm not making that mistake again. Lucas nodded. That was honest, at least. They rode down in silence. When the doors opened in the lobby, Emily ran ahead, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Outside, the sun was shining. The snow from a few days ago was already melting, leaving puddles on the sidewalk. What are you doing for Christmas? Ava asked. Lucas shrugged. Probably just Emily and me. We'll make a big breakfast, watch movies, open presents. It's our tradition. That sounds nice. What about you? I'll probably work. Lucas looked at her. Seriously? I don't really have anywhere else to be. My parents are in Europe. My brother and I don't talk. Work is easier. Lucas hesitated. Then he said, You could come over if you want. Nothing fancy, just breakfast and bad movies. Ava looked surprised. Are you sure? Emily would love it. And honestly, after everything, it'd be nice to have company. Ava smiled. A real smile, not the corporate one she wore in meetings. Okay, yeah, I'd like that. They exchanged information and made plans for tomorrow morning. Then Ava got into her Tesla and drove away. Lucas and Emily walked to the Camry. Emily climbed into her booster seat and immediately started talking about the nice dragon and whether they could get a real pet dragon for Christmas. I don't think they make those at the pet store, Bug. But what if they did? Then we'd have to get a bigger house. Emily seemed to find this acceptable. Lucas started the car and pulled out of the parking garage. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Heard about Richard. Holy hell, man. You okay? Lucas typed back with one hand. Yeah. Long story. I'll fill you in later. Another text came through, this one from the police department. A reminder about coming in tomorrow to give a formal statement. Lucas set the phone down. Tomorrow. He'd deal with all of it tomorrow. They stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Lucas needed ingredients for Christmas breakfast, and also something decent to serve if Ava was actually coming over. He ended up buying way too much food, including fancy coffee that cost twice what he usually paid. Emily insisted they needed Christmas cookies too, even though they'd just made some that morning. Lucas didn't argue. Back at home, they spent the afternoon decorating their small Christmas tree. It was a fake one Lucas had bought on clearance 3 years ago. Half the lights didn't work, and it leaned slightly to the left. But Emily loved it. They hung ornaments, most of them handmade from Emily's preschool years. Popsicle stick snowflakes. Painted pine cones. A clay handprint from when she was 3. Lucas found himself thinking about Richard while they decorated, about how someone he'd trusted and respected could have been planning to destroy him for months. It was the kind of betrayal that made you question everything. Daddy, you're not hanging the ornament, Emily pointed out. Lucas realized he'd been standing there holding a felt reindeer for the last 2 minutes. Sorry, Bug, just thinking. About what? About how lucky I am to have you. Chaos. Emily wrinkled her nose. That's mushy. Yeah, well, get used to it. They finished decorating and made dinner. More spaghetti, because Lucas's culinary repertoire hadn't expanded in the last 24 hours. After dinner, Emily wanted to watch a Christmas movie. They settled on an animated one about a penguin trying to save Christmas. Lucas had seen it at least 20 times, but Emily never got tired of it. Halfway through, Emily fell asleep curled up against Lucas's side. He looked down at her peaceful face and felt the weight of the last few days settle on his shoulders. He'd almost lost everything. His job, his reputation, maybe even his daughter if things had gone differently. But they hadn't. Richard was in jail. The truth was out. And somehow, impossibly, things were starting to look up. Lucas carried Emily to bed and tucked her in. Mr. Bear was already waiting on the pillow. Tomorrow's Christmas, Emily mumbled, half asleep. I know, Bug. I hope I get a dragon. We'll see. Lucas kissed her forehead and went back downstairs. He sat on the couch and pulled out his laptop. There were hundreds of emails he'd been ignoring, news alerts about Richard's arrest, messages from coworkers asking if he was okay, and one email from Martin Chen. The subject line read, "Formal offer." Lucas opened it. Inside was a detailed contract outlining the consultant position. The salary was more than he'd been making as a full-time engineer. The benefits were better. The hours were flexible, with a maximum of 30 hours per week and no mandatory in-office time. At the bottom was a note from Martin. Lucas, we failed you. We created a culture where people like Richard could thrive by stepping on people like you. That changes now. If you decide to come back, you have my word that we'll do better. Martin Lucas read the email 3 times. Then he closed his laptop and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Christmas. He'd think about everything else after that. The next morning, Emily woke Lucas up at 6 a.m. by jumping on his bed and shouting about presents. Okay, I'm up. Yes, Ike. Oh, Ike. They went downstairs. The presents under the tree were modest. Lucas had bought what he could afford, which wasn't much. Some books. A stuffed unicorn. A science kit. Emily tore through them with the kind of enthusiasm that made every gift seem like the best thing she'd ever received. This is the best Christmas ever, she declared, hugging the unicorn. Lucas smiled. I'm glad you think so. The doorbell rang at 8:30. Ava stood on the porch holding a bag from an expensive bakery and looking nervous. Hi, she said. Hi. Come in. Ava stepped inside and looked around. I brought pastries. I wasn't sure what you'd need. Pastries are perfect. Emily ran into the room and stopped short when she saw Ava. Miss Sinclair, you're here for Christmas. I am, if that's okay with you. It's very okay. Do you want to see my unicorn? Emily didn't wait for an answer. She dragged Ava into the living room and proceeded to show her every single present in excruciating detail. Lucas went into the kitchen and started making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, the fancy coffee he'd bought yesterday. Ava eventually extracted herself from Emily's tour and joined him in the kitchen. Need help? She asked. You know how to cook? I can scramble eggs without burning them. That's about it. Then you're hired, right? They worked together in the small kitchen, bumping into each other occasionally, making small talk about nothing important. It was strange and comfortable at the same time. They ate breakfast together at the small kitchen table. Emily talked nonstop about her unicorn and whether unicorns were real and if they were, where they lived. Ava engaged with every question seriously, like she was discussing a business strategy instead of mythical creatures. After breakfast, they watched the movie Emily had picked out. It was terrible and cheesy, and Emily loved every second. Ava sat on one end of the couch. Lucas sat on the other. Emily sat between them, narrating the parts she found particularly exciting. At some point, Lucas looked over and saw Ava smiling. Not her CEO smile, not her polite social smile. A genuine, unguarded smile. When the movie ended, Emily wanted to play restaurant again. Ava gamely agreed to be the customer while Emily served her invisible food. Lucas watched from the kitchen, cleaning up breakfast dishes, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Around noon, Ava's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. I have to take this. Work. Go ahead. Ava stepped into the hallway. Lucas could hear her voice, sharp and professional again, dealing with some crisis he wasn't part of anymore. When she came back, she looked apologetic. I have to go. There's an issue with the statement we're releasing about Richard. It's okay. Thanks for coming. Ava looked at Emily, then at Lucas. Thank you for inviting me. This was nice. Yeah, it was. Ava gathered her things and headed for the door. Emily ran up and hugged her legs. Will you come back? Emily asked. Ava looked surprised. Then she crouched down to Emily's level. If your dad says it's okay, I'd like that. Emily looked at Lucas. Lucas nodded. Then yes, Ava said. I'll come back. After Ava left, Lucas and Emily spent the rest of the day doing nothing important. They built a fort out of couch cushions. They made more cookies, these ones only slightly less misshapen than yesterday's. They watched another movie. That evening, after Emily was asleep, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He pulled up Martin's email and read the contract one more time. Then he started typing his response. Lucas stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before he started typing. Martin, I accept the offer, but I have some conditions. He listed them out. No more than 25 hours a week. All meetings scheduled at least 48 hours in advance. No weekend work unless it was a genuine emergency, and he got to define what constituted an emergency. In one non-negotiable clause, if Emily needed him, work stopped. No questions asked. He read it over 3 times before hitting send. The response came back in less than 5 minutes. Agreed to all terms. Welcome back. We'll finalize paperwork after the holidays. Enjoy your time with Emily. Martin Lucas closed the laptop and sat in the quiet kitchen. The house creaked around him. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, he could hear distant traffic and the sound of someone's wind chimes. He'd done it, actually done it. For the first time in 12 years, he'd set boundaries. And they'd been accepted. Lucas went upstairs and checked on Emily. She was sprawled across her bed, Mr. Bear dangling off the edge. He tucked the blanket around her and went to his own room. Sleep came easier than it had in months. The day after Christmas, Lucas took Emily to the police station to give his formal statement. A detective named Morrison took them into a small interview room that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Emily sat in the corner with her tablet while Lucas walked Morrison through everything. The timeline, the evidence, the confrontation in the cafeteria. Morrison listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. And you're sure Brennan knew about your daughter's illness before the system failure? Morrison asked. Positive. I have the chat logs showing him tracking my movements. Morrison nodded. We'll need copies of everything you have. The prosecutor is going to want to build an airtight case. Lucas handed over a second USB drive he'd prepared. Everything was on it. Every log, every email, every piece of evidence. Morrison plugged it into his computer and spent 10 minutes reviewing the files. Then he leaned back in his chair. This is solid work, Mr. Carter. Most people don't document things this thoroughly. I'm an engineer. Documentation is kind of our thing. Morrison almost smiled. Well, it's going to make the prosecutor's job a lot easier. Brennan's lawyer is already trying to make a deal, but with evidence like this, I don't think the DA is going to be interested. Good, Lucas said. They finished the interview an hour later. As Lucas and Emily were leaving, Morrison called after them. Mr. Carter, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. A lot of people would have just walked away. Lucas nodded and led Emily out to the car. On the drive home, Emily asked, Is the bad man going to jail? Lucas had tried to shield her from most of this, but kids picked up more than you thought. Yeah, Bug, he is. Good. He was mean to you. He was. Are you sad? Lucas thought about that. A little. He used to be my friend. Why would a friend be mean? Sometimes people change. Or maybe they were never really your friend to begin with. It's hard to tell sometimes. Emily seemed to accept this. She went back to looking out the window at the passing houses, their Christmas lights still twinkling in the gray afternoon. The next week passed in a strange kind of limbo. Lucas spent his days with Emily, catching up on all the time he'd missed over the years. They went to the Science Museum. They made snow angels in the front yard. They built elaborate structures out of Legos that took over the entire living room floor. Ava called twice. Once to tell him the company's statement had been well received and the stock price had actually gone up. Investors apparently liked transparency and accountability. The second time, she just asked how he was doing. Better, Lucas had said, getting used to having actual time off. It's weird, isn't it? Not working constantly. Very weird. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. It was the most normal conversation Lucas had ever had with her. On New Year's Eve, Marcus came over with pizza and beer. Emily was at a sleepover at her friend Mia's house, which meant Lucas actually had an evening to himself. They sat on the couch eating pizza straight from the box and watching the ball drop on TV. So, Marcus said, around a mouthful of pepperoni, you're really going back? Yeah, but on my terms this time. Man, I wish I had the guts to do what you did. Lucas looked at him. What do you mean? Walk away. Stand up to Ava. Punch Richard in the face. Marcus grinned. That last one especially. I don't recommend the punching. It hurt my hand and got me questioned by police. Still worth it though, right? Lucas thought about it. Yeah, it was. They drank beer and talked about old projects, office gossip, the new engineers who didn't know what they were doing, normal stuff. The kind of conversation Lucas had missed. Around 11, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. I gotta go. My girlfriend wants me at her friend's party. You have a girlfriend? For 3 months now. I've mentioned her like 6 times. Sorry, I've been kind of distracted. Marcus stood up and grabbed his coat. You know what your problem is, Carter? You don't pay attention to anything that isn't code or your kid. That's not a problem. That's prioritization. It's loneliness disguised as dedication. Marcus left before Lucas could formulate a response. Lucas sat alone in the quiet house and thought about that. Was he lonely? He had Emily. He had work, or would have it again soon. He had Marcus, sort of. But Marcus wasn't wrong. Lucas's entire life had been structured around 2 things: being a good father and being a good engineer. Everything else had fallen away. He cleaned up the pizza boxes and beer bottles. Outside, fireworks started going off in the distance. People celebrating the new year, the fresh start, all those promises they'd make and probably break by February. Lucas made himself a promise too, standing there in his messy kitchen at 11:47 p.m. He was going to figure out how to have a life, a real one. Not just the spaces between work and parenting. He had no idea how to do that, but he was going to try. January came in cold and bright. Lucas started his consultant position on the 5th. His first project was a security audit of the entire network infrastructure. Ironically, the same one the board had promised to do after Richard's sabotage. He worked from home. setting up a makeshift office in the corner of his bedroom. 3 hours in the morning while Emily was at school, 2 hours in the evening after dinner. That was it. It felt wrong at first, like he was slacking off, like someone would call and yell at him for not working hard enough. No one called. The work got done. The audit progressed. And Lucas actually had time to pick Emily up from school, help with homework, make dinner that wasn't microwaved or from a box. 2 weeks into January, Ava called. How's the audit going? Good. I found 3 major vulnerabilities and about a dozen minor ones. I'm documenting everything. That's great. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Lucas waited. The board wants to implement the flexible work policy company-wide, not just for you, for everyone who wants it. Seriously?
Oh, seriously. You were right. People have lives. We can't keep pretending work is the only thing that matters. What changed your mind? Ava was quiet for a moment. Christmas. Watching you with Emily, realizing I've spent 15 years building a company and I have no one to share it with. That's not success.
That's just being alone with money. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. Anyway, Ava continued, I wanted to thank you for showing me there's another way to do this. You're welcome. Also, Emily invited me to her birthday party in March. Is that okay? Lucas smiled. Yeah, that's okay. Set. They hung up. Lucas went back to work, but his mind kept drifting. Ava was changing. The company was changing. Maybe he was changing too. In February, Richard's trial date was set. The prosecutor called Lucas to discuss testimony. Apparently, Richard's lawyer was trying to argue that Lucas had fabricated the evidence, that the whole thing was a vendetta. It's a desperate move, the prosecutor said, but we need to be prepared. Can you walk a jury through the technical evidence?
Yeah, I can do that. Good. I'll be in touch. Lucas told Emily about the trial that night over dinner. Do you have to see the bad man again? She asked. Yeah, Bug, I do.
Will he hurt you?
No, he'll be in handcuffs, and there will be lots of people there to keep everyone safe. Emily thought about this while chewing her macaroni. Are you scared?
A little, but sometimes you have to do scary things because they're the right things. Like going to the dentist?
Lucas laughed. Exactly like going to the dentist. The trial started on a Monday in late February. Lucas wore the one suit he owned, bought 6 years ago for a job interview he didn't get.
It was a little tight in the shoulders now. The courthouse was downtown, a gray stone building that looked like it had been there since before cars were invented. Lucas climbed the steps and went through security, then found the courtroom. Ava was already there, sitting in the gallery. She'd already testified the day before. Lucas slid into the seat next to her. How'd it go? He asked. Richard's lawyer tried to make me look incompetent, said I created a toxic work environment that drove him to desperate measures. Did it work? The jury looked skeptical, but we'll see. They sat through the morning session. Expert witnesses talking about network security and digital forensics. It was dry and technical, and Lucas could see several jury members struggling to stay awake. After lunch, the prosecutor called Lucas to the stand. Lucas walked to the front of the courtroom, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then he sat down and looked out at the courtroom. Richard sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Lucas's car. He looked calm, confident, like this was all a minor inconvenience. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Reeves, approached the stand. Mr. Carter, can you explain your role at the company? I was the lead software engineer. I designed and maintained the authentication systems that control user access. And what happened on December 21st of last year? Lucas walked through the timeline, the call from Emily's school, the system failure, his decision to leave, Richard's threats. Jennifer pulled up the chat logs on a screen visible to the jury. Can you explain what we're looking at here? These are internal company messages showing Richard Brennan tracking my movements and waiting for me to leave the office before triggering the system failure. And how do you know he triggered it? Lucas explained the manual override, the command strings in the server logs, the timestamps that lined up perfectly. The jury was paying attention now. Richard's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Caldwell, cross-examined him next. Mr. Carter, Isn't it true that you had access to the same systems as Mr. Brennan? Yes. So you could have triggered the failure yourself and blamed it on him. I could have, but I didn't. How can we be sure? Because I was at my daughter's school when it happened, then at the hospital. There are time-stamped records of everywhere I was. Caldwell tried a different angle. You've admitted to breaking into Mr. Brennan's office and accessing his computer without permission. Isn't that illegal? I had building access, and I was trying to find evidence of sabotage.
So you took the law into your own hands.
Lucas met Caldwell's eyes. I tried to save my reputation and my career from someone who was actively trying to destroy them. If that's taking the law into my own hands, then yes, that's what I did. Caldwell looked frustrated. He asked a few more questions, but Lucas answered each one calmly, sticking to the facts. When Lucas stepped down, he felt drained. He returned to his seat next to Ava. You did good, she whispered. The trial lasted 3 more days. More witnesses, more evidence. Richard never took the stand. On Friday afternoon, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Lucas felt something release in his chest, something he'd been holding on to for months. Richard was sentenced 2 weeks later. 5 years for corporate espionage. 2 years for sabotage to run concurrently, plus restitution to the company and to Lucas personally for damages. Lucas didn't go to the sentencing. He'd seen enough of Richard Brennan to last a lifetime. Instead, he spent the day with Emily at the park. They fed ducks, played on the swings, and got ice cream even though it was still cold enough to see their breath. Is everything better now? Emily asked, chocolate ice cream smeared on her face. Lucas wiped her chin with a napkin. Yeah, Bug, everything's better now. And he meant it. March came in like a lamb. Emily's birthday party was on a Saturday. Lucas invited her whole class, Marcus and Ava. 15 kids showed up and immediately turned Lucas's house into a war zone. There were balloons everywhere, cake smashed into the carpet, and a volume level that probably violated noise ordinances. Lucas stood in the kitchen, watching the chaos, and smiled. Ava found him there around 3 p.m. Surviving? She asked. Barely. I brought wine for after. You're my hero. Oh. They stood side by side, watching Emily open presents in the living room. She was 7 now, growing up too fast. I've been thinking, Ava said. About what? About taking some time off. Actual time off. Not working remotely or checking emails. Just disconnecting. Lucas looked at her. Who are you, and what did you do with Ava Sinclair? She smiled. I'm serious. I've never taken a real vacation. Not in 15 years. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can think. Thinking is overrated. You should go somewhere you cannot think. Ava laughed. Is there such a place? I'll let you know when I find it. Us. The party wound down around 5. Parents collected their sugar-buzzed children. Marcus left with a girl Lucas had never met before, which apparently was girlfriend number 2. Ava helped clean up. They filled 3 trash bags with wrapping paper and paper plates. You don't have to help, Lucas said. I know, but I want to. They finished cleaning and opened the wine Ava had brought. It was good wine, the kind Lucas would never buy for himself. They sat on the back porch while Emily played in her room. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Sure. Do you regret any of it? Building the company the way you did? Ava thought for a long time. I regret the cost, the relationships I didn't build, the life I didn't live. But the company itself? No, I'm proud of what we created. Even after Richard? Especially after Richard, because we survived it. We changed because of it. That matters. Lucas nodded. I used to think success meant working harder than everyone else, sacrificing more, proving I was indispensable. And now? Now I think success is being able to make breakfast for my daughter on a random Tuesday, being able to say no when work asks too much, having time to figure out who I am outside of my job. Ava raised her glass. To figuring it out. Lucas clinked his glass against hers. To figuring it out. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Emily came outside carrying Mr. Bear. Daddy, can Miss Sinclair stay for dinner? Lucas looked at Ava. Can you? Mom. Yes, I'd like that. They ordered pizza and ate it at the kitchen table. Emily talked about her birthday party, listing every present she'd received in excruciating detail. After dinner, they watched a movie Emily picked, some animated thing about talking animals. Lucas fell asleep halfway through and woke up to find Emily asleep on his lap and Ava scrolling through her phone with the sound off. Sorry, Lucas said quietly. Didn't mean to doze off. It's fine, you needed it. Ma. Lucas looked down at Emily. I should get her to bed. I should go anyway. It's late. Lucas carried Emily upstairs and tucked her in. When he came back down, Ava was putting on her coat. Thanks for coming, Lucas said. Thanks for inviting me. I had fun. So did Emily. She really likes you. I really like her too. Ava paused. And you. I like you too. Lucas felt something shift in the air between them. Ava, what? Is. I'm not saying we have to figure out what that means right now, Ava said quickly. I just wanted you to know. Lucas nodded. I like you too, but I need to take things slow. For Emily's sake. I understand. Slow is good. Ava left. Lucas stood in the doorway and watched her drive away. He went back inside and sat on the couch, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 3 months. He'd lost a job and gained a better one. He'd been betrayed and found unexpected allies. He'd learned to set boundaries and demand respect. But more than that, he'd learned something about what actually mattered. It wasn't the late nights or the sacrifices or proving himself over and over. It was the quiet moments, the breakfast conversations, the birthday parties, the people who showed up when things fell apart. That was success. That was what he'd been missing. Lucas pulled out his phone and opened his email. There was a message from Martin with the subject line, Q2 projects. Lucas read through it. 3 potential consulting engagements, all interesting, all within his hourly limit. He started typing a response, then stopped. It was 9 p.m. on a Saturday. The email could wait until Monday. Lucas closed his laptop and went upstairs to bed. The weeks turned into months. Spring came early that year, thawing the frozen ground and bringing the first hints of green to the trees. Lucas settled into his new routine. Work that challenged him but didn't consume him. Time with Emily that wasn't squeezed between emergencies. Even occasional evenings with Ava, who was slowly becoming a fixed presence in his life. They took things slowly, like he'd asked. Coffee dates when Emily was at school, walks in the park on weekends, conversations that went deeper than work and surface-level pleasantries. Ava met Emily's teacher at a parent conference. She came to Emily's school play and actually seemed to enjoy it, even though Emily only had 2 lines and forgot one of them. In May, the company announced its flexible work policy officially. Half the engineering team immediately signed up. Productivity didn't drop. In fact, several metrics improved. Marcus called Lucas to tell him everyone was talking about it. You started a revolution, man. I just wanted to see my kid more. Same thing. Lucas didn't think it was the same thing, but he appreciated the sentiment. In June, Richard's appeal was denied. He'd serve his full sentence. Lucas felt a twinge of something when he heard the news. Not quite satisfaction, not quite pity, just a quiet acknowledgement that this chapter was finally, truly closed. He told Emily that night. The bad man isn't coming back, he said. Emily, who'd mostly forgotten about the whole thing, just nodded and went back to her homework. Kids were resilient like that. On a warm Saturday in July, Lucas and Ava took Emily to the beach. It was a 2-hour drive to the coast, but Emily had been begging to see the ocean all summer. They spread out towels on the sand and watched Emily run straight into the water, shrieking with delight. She's fearless, Ava observed. Too fearless sometimes. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emily play in the waves. Other families dotted the beach, kids building sandcastles, parents reading books, the sun warm on their skin. I've been thinking about something, Ava said. Yeah? About what you said, about success being more than work. Lucas waited. I think I'm starting to understand it, being here, watching Emily, not checking my email every 5 minutes. It feels good. It does. I'm not sure I'm good at it yet, the not working thing, but I'm trying. Lucas smiled. That's all any of us can do. Emily ran up to them, dripping wet and covered in sand. Daddy, come build a castle with me. Lucas stood up. You coming? He asked Ava. Ava hesitated for only a second. Yeah, I'm coming. They spent the next hour building an elaborate sandcastle with turrets and a moat and a bridge made of driftwood. Emily directed the whole operation like a tiny architect, telling them exactly where everything should go. When it was finished, Emily stood back and admired their work. It's perfect, she declared. Lucas looked at the lopsided castle with its collapsing walls and uneven towers. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was theirs, built together, and that made it good enough. The sun was setting as they packed up to leave. Emily fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home, exhausted and happy. Lucas glanced at Ava in the passenger seat. She was looking out the window, watching the landscape pass by. Thank you for today, Lucas said. Thank you for inviting me. You know, when we first started this whole thing, I never thought we'd end up here.
Where's here? Well,
Lucas thought about it. Friends, maybe more than friends eventually, building sandcastles on a Saturday. Ava smiled. It's better than I expected. Better how? Just better, more real, less empty. Lucas understood that. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they got back to Lucas's house, Ava helped carry Emily inside and upstairs to bed. At the front door, Ava paused. I should go. You could stay, Lucas said. Then quickly, on the couch, if you're too tired to drive. Ava considered this. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Lucas gave her a blanket and a pillow. They said goodnight, and Lucas went upstairs to his room. He lay in bed, listening to the quiet sounds of his house. Emily's soft breathing from down the hall, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of Ava settling onto the couch. Lucas thought about the last 7 months, everything he'd lost and everything he'd gained, the people who'd betrayed him and the people who'd surprised him. He thought about Richard, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably still convinced he'd been in the right. He thought about Ava, slowly learning to be human instead of just being a CEO. He thought about Emily, growing up in a house where her father was actually present. And he thought about himself, about the choice he'd made that night in the hospital when everything was falling apart. He'd chosen Emily over his career, chosen being a father over being indispensable. It had seemed like the end of everything at the time, but it had actually been the beginning of setting boundaries, of demanding respect, of building a life instead of just surviving one. Lucas closed his eyes and let sleep take him. The next morning, he woke up to the smell of coffee. He went downstairs and found Ava in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast. I hope scrambled eggs are okay, she said. It's literally all I know how to make. Scrambled eggs are perfect. Emily wandered in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is Miss Sinclair staying for breakfast? Looks like it, Lucas said. Emily climbed into her chair. Can she stay for other things too? Lucas and Ava exchanged a glance. What kind of other things? Lucas asked. I don't know. Stuff. Like movie night and dinner and maybe living here? Lucas nearly choked on his coffee. Emily. What? I like her. And you like her. And she's here all the time anyway. Ava was trying very hard not to smile. That's a conversation for adults, Bug, Lucas said. Adults are slow at conversations. Yeah, well, some things take time. Emily accepted this with a shrug and started eating the eggs Ava had made. After breakfast, Ava left to go home and change. At the door, she turned back to Lucas. For what it's worth, I like being here, with you and Emily. We like having you here. So maybe we don't have to figure everything out right now. Maybe we just keep doing this, seeing where it goes. Lucas smiled. I can live with that. Ava kissed him on the cheek and left. Lucas stood in the doorway watching her drive away and realized something. He was happy. Not the frantic achievement-based happiness of meeting a deadline or getting a promotion, not the exhausted satisfaction of making it through another impossible day. Just simple, quiet happiness. The kind that came from building a life instead of just surviving one. The kind that came from choosing what mattered. Lucas closed the door and went back inside, where Emily was trying to teach Mr. Bear how to play chess with pieces she'd set up all wrong. Daddy, can you help? Mr. Bear doesn't understand the rules. Sure, Bug.
Let's teach him together. Lucas sat down on the floor and started rearranging the chess pieces. Emily watched carefully, asking questions about why each piece moved the way it did. Outside, the summer sun climbed higher in the sky. Somewhere across town, Ava was probably already checking her email. Somewhere else, Marcus was probably sleeping off a late night. And somewhere in a prison, Richard Brennan was learning that actions had consequences. But here, in this small house with the leaking faucet and the broken furnace and the yard full of weeds, Lucas Carter was exactly where he needed to be, teaching his daughter chess, building a life, choosing what mattered. And that, he'd finally learned, was the only success that actually counted.